Welcome to our final town hall from Families Together's Family Empowerment Month. Throughout the month of February, we've been having town halls with commissioners and legislators to address questions from family members and young people on the different issues that affect our families. We've had town halls with commissioners from OCFS, OMH, OPWDD, and now today we have one with our commissioner and deputy commissioner from the State Education Department. For those of you who attended last year's, you got a chance to see the commissioner. Commissioner Rosa has been just very open and willing to meet with family members and young people to hear our concerns, address our issues, and give us hope and opportunity for to have optimism into the future. And I think this year is even going to be more so the case. So it's my pleasure. I'm Paige Pierce. I'm the CEO of Families Together in New York State. It's my pleasure to introduce Commissioner Betty Rosa and also Deputy Commissioner Kathleen D. Cataldo, who are both joining us today. And I wondered if you wanted to just say a couple words to welcome the group.
Thank you. Thank you, Paige. And I just said that this is a reminder of how important this work is, particularly in having the kinds of conversations that we need to have as we start to think about, obviously, ways that we can address our mental health crisis and look for solutions and look for ways that, as you spoke to having conversations with the various commissioners, how we can do a good deal of this work in a cross-agency approach to respond to a comprehensive way to create intersections and interconnections. And I really believe that, I know you do, about being very intentional in this work. And for that, I am so grateful every time we have this opportunity to engage in a dialogue and to also make sure that the public understands that this work is complex, but it's also work that we really need to respond to and reimagine. Thank you.
And if you're giving me a second page, sure. So I'm Kathleen B. Cataldo, and I really appreciate the promotion, but I'm an assistant commissioner, not a deputy, so thank you. And I'm just so pleased to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to listen and to hear the concerns expressed by your membership. I know the commissioner appreciates that opportunity too. We know that the struggles are real. We know how hard everything is for our families, for our staff in schools, for our students. We're all like done with COVID. So it's really important for us to hear where you're struggling and what we can do to help. So thank you for including me.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Commissioner. I think that I want to promote you, Kathleen, because we know you're an ally and a friend in the State Education Department. We're very grateful that you're there and carrying our flag for us in many ways. It's my pleasure today to introduce Susan Berger, who has been at Families Together since its inception and originally a board member and then has been on our staff for 25 years. And Susan is going to be the moderator for today's town hall. So Susan.
Hi, everybody, and welcome Commissioner Rosa and Assistant Commissioner Di Cataldo. So for myself, education is particularly important to me. I have 3 children, one of whom is on the autism spectrum, and he was lucky enough to be able to receive very helpful services from the time he was 3 up until he actually graduated from college. So I know the impact that appropriate services and helpful services can have for a child with a disability and, you know, children who are just struggling. So this topic is something that, I volunteered to do this particular town hall because it's really near and dear to my heart. My son is grown now. And I think because of the services that he got while he was in school, is a productive member of society. He has a full-time job and works, helping other individuals on the spectrum gain employment. And he lives independently, and we're very proud of the work that he did. So back to the topics at hand here. There's still, I think, a lot of work to be done. So we have some people who have questions around some of those topics. And I'm going to start with Mariama Tove Friedland, and she's going to introduce herself and ask a question. Oh, I think
Sorry, figured it out. Hi, Commissioner. My name is Mariama Tove Friedland. I am from Staten Island, and I have both experience in school with receiving counseling services and also having an IEP and just navigating my way through school with an IEP. So my question is, the U.S. Surgeon General and American Academy of Pediatrics both declared that youth are facing a national youth mental health crisis. As parents of young people, we were living in crisis in our communities well before COVID. And research shows that 21 times more, students 21 times more likely to seek mental health support and challenges at school and in the community. Also showed that the quality of school climate may be a single most productive factor in the school capacity to promote student achievement. What role will the New York State education system play to help address this worsened student mental health crisis? And will this include collaborations with other child serving systems?
Great question. And it's a question I'm going to share with Kathleen because of Kathleen, we've been able to, in the department, really respond to the issue of this cross-agency work. And we had, as some of you may know, we had a convening, and we continue even this week to have conversations of how we can truly take the work that we're doing in isolation at times and create those intersections, as I said in my opening remarks. The other part that I think is important is to think about the mental health services in a comprehensive way. Obviously, in our department, we often talk about whole child, whole family, and how do we support the whole community so that we can embed in our communities services that are localized so that it doesn't feel like people have to go outside to receive these services, but rather that in many ways, and most of you know, I am a product of having been a principal of a community school that was open 6 days a week, 10 p.m., and it was the hub of the community in Washington Heights. And so having these services in spaces and places that feel very comfortable, that is welcoming, and that people also have, what I call mental health, addressing it through culturally competent ways as well. Because a lot of times we think about mental health services and providers and facilities and funding, and we think about all of that, but I think it's time to reimagine how we not only fund the care of people, but how we also embed that with an issue of being culturally responsive as well, understanding the issues of local communities, and having providers that not only speak the language, understand the culture, can facilitate the what we call build the trust with the patient and build the trust with the individual and families. So for us, it's looking at similar to, so I'm going to take it a little bit outside, similar to, how we do assessment for students to find out where they are. But we also have to do the same kind of assessments for mental health services. We have to really look at ways to look at evidence-based practices, to look at how we use the technologies and in ways, telehealth, to really support the systems that are currently in place. So the one thing I want to say in terms of what I just mentioned about the same way that we look at assessment from academics and physical, that we really have to do the kinds of screening, the kind of early identification and early, not only prevention, but intervention, and have the kinds of tools to track these improvements as well. So that the lessons that we have learned in terms of improving, as you know, responding to the academic needs, the same kinds of lessons that we need to use to improve and track and create what we call and develop a framework for excellence in mental health and well-being. Kathleen?
Thank you, Commissioner. You said so much. There's not much left to say. But this topic, we all know, is this, we are all in crisis, as the Commissioner said, and as you noted, Mariama, I tell you, my husband grew up on Staten Island, so almost neighbors. So, I think the way we look at it, is multi-tiered systems of supports in schools, right? Really thinking about what interventions does everybody need? And that is, New York State was one of the first states to pass mental health education in schools. And that is so critical to removing the stigma of mental health issues, teaching kids themselves to understand that, their mental health is part of their overall health and it's okay to seek help. We work very closely with the Office of Mental Health and with Mahaney's, and providing webinars, and we just released new guidance on suicide prevention for schools, really with protocols, very concrete tools for schools to use for creating crisis intervention teams, for having policies so staff know what to do when a child is having a crisis, and we're really very proud of that new guidance. But as you think about that multi-tiered system of support, right? So what we've found in the research has shown is that it used to be those kids at the top of the pyramid, that 3 to 5% that needed the really intensive interventions. It's now 15%. And schools just don't have the staff or the access to resources. And Commissioner meets frequently with Commissioner Sullivan, and OMH is saying they have a crisis in having, and especially having staff who are trained to work with young people, right? It's very different to work with elementary students, middle school students, and high schoolers than adults. So there's a lot more we need to do. There's a lot of money out there. But we need to have the appropriate people to be able to work with kids and build those connections in the communities to the resources that are there. And we still have a lot more work to do around that, really making those connections to the community resources. Community schools are one of my favorite models that are around. And one of the things that we're also very proud of is we are going to have a joint RFP with the Office of Children and Family Services. We're also working with OMH and OASIS on that as well. And we're going to be building more family resource centers, which is really the community schools model. But, looking at creating hubs where it's easy for families to access the services they need so that they can help their kids get to school and do their homework and address their mental health needs. So we have a lot of work going on, but there's so much more to do.
Thank you so much for those answers, and it's really great to hear such exciting and innovative solutions, and be looking forward to seeing those moving forward. Our next question is from Tony Smith Thompson.
Thank you so much. Hi, Commissioner and Assistant Commissioner. It's great to see you both, and thank you for being here. I'm in New York City. I have 3 kids and at high school, middle school, and elementary school, and my youngest is in 2nd grade. And he had a really hard time learning remotely and had a really hard time adjusting back into the classroom. A lot of sensory sensitivities, right? Sensitivity to sound and smell. And so a classroom environment was, there was a lot of transition there. And we are really fortunate that at our school, there is a whole child approach, which, Commissioner, I know you have a wonderful background in. And all of the adults he works with are there to make sure that he stays integrated with his classroom and with his friends. But I know other families whose schools don't take this approach, and I know that in many other schools, my son would be suspended frequently, or more severely, pushed out of the school, possibly with law enforcement intervention and other types of trauma that just kind of add on to what students have already experienced. And so the question that I want to ask today is, as students adjust and reintegrate back into their schools, and as educators, school leaders, and service providers work to rebuild that sense of community, the state has an important role to play in protecting the most impacted students from pushout and keeping them connected to their learning environment. And so interested your thoughts about what New York State will do to help move school districts away from using suspensions and other punitive school discipline as the go-to response to youth behavior, which is what we are starting to see again.
Sure, that is, first of all, I had a smile when I thought, it's one thing to have 3 children in a school system, but 1 in every level is totally amazing. So let me start by acknowledging and recognizing that because of COVID and because of having to pivot and because of looking at the various modalities that had to be used to continue while schools, buildings were closed, instruction had to continue. And so the one thing that sometimes we don't step back and reflect on is that our children at different levels, we have children today that may, as you said, maybe in 2nd grade, that is their entry point in some cases to schooling. And you have students that may be in high school that had an incomplete, developmentally, an incomplete sense of middle school, and now they're in high school and vice versa. So one of the things I think we often forget is the loss of many of the social benchmarks that are critical to our children, right, as they go through this process. And many of the socialization and developmental issues that are very much connected as students go through schooling, right? So that many times we take for granted those developmental stages that our children go through and the lessons that are so connected with those stages. And so children right now, that many of them who have gone from being in person, isolated, trauma, all kinds of issues, and also the loss of many of these social benchmarks, such as for some graduation, proms, right? All the different things. And then the isolation of students, for example, who have been used to when they see their friends, hugging their friends, connecting by having different ways of greeting, connecting with their teachers, connecting in that social environment. Because remember, schooling is also about socialization, right? And so here we are in the middle of this pandemic that has put up these shields or guards in terms of student socialization. And children in many ways have had to negotiate those barriers in ways that have been very challenging for them. And so I would say that part of what we're trying to do is to help schools, support schools in looking at these issues, not only from the benchmarks of socialization and the things that children have missed, but how to begin to transition, right? And also understanding that there are going to be social gaps as a result of going through this process. And then how do you fill the bucket? How do you create opportunities to do that? And that to us is extremely important, to look for ways of doing that. And I want to go back to something I said, with when we think about mental health, when I think about mental health services and mental health wellness, and I talked about, being culturally, creating culturally competent care. That is important because we don't talk about that as much. We talk about mental health services, but we don't spend enough time thinking about culturally competent care and what that means in terms of the individual's language, culture, what it means in terms, for students as we do this work, to emphasize that culturally competent care that really responds to the community and the needs, the very specific needs of that student. And so to your point about, your children and other people's children, how do we look at the barriers, the reentry, the issues that we know we have to make sure that are very much in place. I know from what you just said that I'm sure your school uses restorative practices. It's clear from your messaging that that's there to solve conflicts. I know that I'm sure they have peer mediation, right? Because that's the kind of work that we at the state level support in order to deal with conflicts. And we are right now, some of this trauma, it's not just trauma to the individual, there's trauma to the workspace, there's trauma to the school space as children negotiate their way into that whole re-entry, relearning the rules, because many of these rules were in place, but we had to adjust to new rules. And now as we move through these new rules, how do we negotiate? How do we relearn? And as I said, how do we go back to the issue of children seeing other children and feeling comfortable enough to even touch other children? We created space of 6 feet away from, masks, ways of saying, stay away. We were doing this, and now we're going to start to do this. How do we readjust to that process? And so we are going to be dealing with a lot of issues of what I call, we've created a lot of emotional dissonance. And how do we recreate emotional stability in our spaces, and not just in schools, in communities in general. And even going to the fact that you talked about suspensions. How do we address the behavior and don't necessarily look to punitive ways of further disconnecting our young people, when in fact, what they need is nurturing. What they need is comfort, support, and knowing that these are safe spaces for them to begin to reconnect, because they have been disconnected. Kathleen?
Yes, Commissioner, I know that Paige had said that she wanted to jump in to
Sure.
say hello to the Senate.
Thanks. I just wanted to welcome Senator Mayer, who is the chair of the Education Committee in the New York State Senate. Thank you so much. I can tell that you're not in New York State right now.
Oh, I'm
which
not.
means you're especially dedicated to this cause enough to take time out of your day today to to join us and listen to questions from families and young people themselves, and also to hear what the commissioner and associate commissioner have to say. Thank you so much, Senator, for joining us.
Thank you, Paige. Everyone calls me Shelly, and it's a pleasure to be with my friend, the commissioner. We work very, very closely. Yes, I am. I just got to Florida to spend a few days with my grandchildren, some of my grandchildren who are out of school next week. And but I promise to do this. So I'll stay on for a little while, as long as I can. And I'm anxious to hear from people and try to respond as thoroughly. I just would say that we're incredibly fortunate to have Commissioner Rosa, who really has a feel for what happens to families, what has happened in this time, much more than many people in the education space. And so I feel very, very fortunate that she's leading that part of our world right now.
Thank you.
So Senator, I don't know if you heard Tony's question that the commissioner was responding to.
Yes, the suspension and discipline issue. Yes, I
Yes.
think, I actually believe that there are really ongoing conversations about trying to find a path forward on this issue between, I think everyone in this COVID recovery time feels that we need to deal with these discipline issues, because I spoke to a number of superintendents this week who told me discipline issues are coming up, very strongly now as kids come back without the socialization of the last 2 years. So there's fighting, there's, aggressive behavior, and superintendents are responding, and we want to be sure that we are being restorative in our discipline. We're mindful of the age of students, and that we, that we do it that we're not using discipline in a punitive way as we try to bring students back. So I think it's a particularly challenging moment, but I'm hopeful that the different sort of sides in this dispute, and they're not that different, can come to some agreement about a bill. We've been unable to move the bill that's been before us, but I think there's really good faith negotiations now to try to find a common ground. And so I'm going to wait and see. Right now, we are in the middle of the budget, the education budget, which includes a lot of issues, but not discipline. And we're very, very focused on those issues, getting enough social and emotional health money for our schools, making sure that the state education department has the resources to do the work they need to do, and helping families recover. So that, I just want to say, for us in the legislature, our focus right now is on the budget. This issue, while very important, is not in the budgetary context.
Susan, you're on mute.
I muted myself and then I forgot. Well, thank you, Senator. And Kathleen, do you want to add anything?
Just that, I appreciate the commissioner's remarks and ending with restorative practices, because we really truly believe that's the way forward in schools. It can be used to reconnect, what all of us are suffering from are those broken connections. And it's not just between students and staff, and those connections are so important to ensure that kids feel safe and welcome. But also it's interpersonal between students and other students, right? So they've forgotten how to deal with each other, and using a community circle in a classroom to rebuild those connections and have meaningful conversations is critical. And since the summer of 2020, the state education department has been saying, take the time. Schools, the most important thing that you can do is take the time to rebuild those all important relationships. So, I hope that the legislature can move forward with the solutions, not suspensions bill. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for all of your comments. I'm going to move on to the next question now, and Christine Andrews is going to ask that question.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Rosa, Assistant DiCataldo, and Senator Shelly. I retired a few years ago after working in early intervention, transitioning children to the 3 to 5 program. And my daughter had some experience with a head injury in school, so I have some experience with 504s and struggling to get services in that way. I am currently working as an FEA, Family Peer Advocate for Center for Family Life and Recovery in Utica, New York, and working with some families who are having trouble getting their teens to school, most of them with IEPs and low IQs. I recently interacted with a child I actually had an early intervention. He's a senior now. He has a 65 IQ. When he was told that he was going to have to take algebra for the third time, Regents algebra, again, 65 IQ, for the third time, he decided to quit school and barely leaves his room. So my question for you, and it also pertains to COVID, the COVID-19 pandemic has led to the waiving of several Regents exam graduation requirements for a standard diploma. Driving this decision was the concern from parents, students, and educators that too many students were falling behind due to disruptions in education. But even before COVID-19, Regent exams were already a barrier to higher education, especially for students with disabilities or ESL learners. Many were and still do call into question the value of these requirements. And in fact, the Board of Regents pledged to reevaluate their role in our education system. What progress has New York State made to advance multiple pathways to diploma beyond passing Regents exams?
Sure. So I go back to where we started with the whole child, looking at really the what I would call the importance of making sure that our students are prepared, that the diploma really symbolizes a sense of accomplishment, but not necessarily a sense of accomplishment in a very narrow kind of way, to your point. And so we, as you know, have been looking at the grad measures, and that was based on an article I wrote way back, as you know, where people immediately, it became a firestorm of, oh, they're looking to get rid of the regents. And in fact, it was more of opening it up to think about creating a superhighway, that it doesn't have to be one lane to get to one place. And that you can, in fact, accomplish getting to different places. You can get to California by train, bus, flying, driving. And so meeting that accomplishment, having the opportunities, focusing more on opportunities and access, and creating the issue of thinking about equity as a way of taking the child or the young student or the young person where they are and moving them to where they want to be and where they hope to be, and be as aspirational with their dreams as their dreams can be fulfilled based on their dreams, not everybody else's or not somebody else's dreams, but their dreams. And so for us, it's been a journey. It's been a tough journey to really involve the voices of many. It's been a journey of looking at grad measures throughout the entire state, having various forums and conversations. We've had 30 of those. We continue to look at research. We continue to have conversations about the importance of being much more open to what students' needs look like. And that's why, you know, when I said even about looking at mental health services and being culturally competent care, it's looking at it from the language, culture, looking at it from services, and looking at it from what is it that we need to ensure that our students have both academically, physically, as well as mentally and wellness. And that is a complete composite. And that we have an obligation, we have a, as I call, a commitment. And if in fact we truly believe that we want to support all students, then we have to support all students based on their needs, not all students based on some needs, right? And so we've engaged in this work. As you know, we've taken a few bumps along the way on the issue of people who think about lowering, standards. But for me, it's not about lowering standards. For me, it's about making sure that the standards work for our students. So that's one issue. And I also think in terms of how do we humanize this conversation, right? We haven't done a good job in humanizing this conversation. And I'll give you a perfect example I often think about. Sometimes we talk about the number of COVID cases. That doesn't humanize the conversation. But if we said the number of people infected by COVID, we humanize that conversation. And so our institution, our agency has done everything to try to humanize the conversation, because children and families and communities are at the core of this conversation. And if we truly believe that they're on the core, it's like I said to somebody the other day, we had a conversation, I'm going to shift a little bit, about DEI, that's become, some people have had issues with it. And I said, if you think about it a little differently, DEI is a belief system. If you believe in diversity, you check it off. If you believe in equity, you check it off. If you believe in inclusiveness, you check it off. Then you believe in DEI. But if what you believe in is exclusiveness, if what you believe is that I should have more of the share than you do, then it's inequity. And if you believe that I want to be separate and apart and different, then it's exclusiveness and not inclusiveness. So people have to humanize these conversations and really go into their core of their belief system. What is it that we believe? And I've said to our staff, our department belief system is that all children can learn and succeed. And that definition of success has to be as personalized and humanized as our individual children. It isn't about all children succeed at the same pace, at the same level, in the same way, or even with the same outcome, end result. So to answer your question, we have to do a better job in not only humanizing this conversation, but we have to do a better job in understanding that the various pathways are the ways of looking at children and students' interest, what they want, to do, and how do we get them there? And that's our commitment and our responsibility. And to that, I'll turn over to the senator or Kathleen.
Kathleen, maybe I just want to say that, we in the legislature are very, very mindful of the problem you identified, that there's a range of students for whom we need broader pathways. And the regents have developed some, and I'm very confident they will continue to look at more, to the example you gave, where a kid is being told to take a regents class that is going to result in failure. An anticipated result in failure is not the path we want to go. So we have been very supportive of the regents as they've developed alternative pathways. I know when I started in the Senate, we had a big fight about getting the first modification of the regents' requirements, remember, Commissioner? And I'm sure there'll be more discussion. That is very much a Regents issue, but with input, and comments from legislators who are very much on the ground in their districts. Last night, I was at a school board meeting, not in my district, but because there's been so much open racism at a school district, I went to be supportive of the school and the students and others, because we need to speak up in these school boards. So I'm only using this example to say that legislators are on the ground hearing this stuff like you described, Christine, and we bring those examples directly to SED, and to their credit, they're extremely responsive on these issues. But I will stop, and maybe the Assistant Commissioner wants to say something.
I have nothing to add. You two covered it all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for raising that. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks for your insight into that. I think that it is, especially for individuals who are, struggling with mental health issues. COVID has, as we've all said, really added to that. I think this is a really important issue, and it does, put a barrier towards higher education. I actually also know someone who had a similar issue to what Christine was talking about, and graduated high school, but was not able to go on to higher education, which really impacted her career. So, it's a really important issue, and thanks for addressing it. And then finally, our last question is from Jenny Laney, and I'm going to give her the mic so she can answer it. Ask it. Sorry.
So, welcome, Commissioner Rosa.
You may want you to answer
Commissioner
it, Jenny.
DeCaldo, and Senator Mayer. So my name is Jenny Laney, and I live in Buffalo, New York. I'm the a parent of a young adult that receives special education services, as well as a grandparent of 2 children receiving special education, one in kindergarten and one in 7th grade. The 7th grader has had mental health challenges since 4th grade, started with the school shootings, and now was recently diagnosed with autism. And for our kiddos who need that support, that school day is so long. So if we don't have that support, it's hard for them to be successful. So family and youth peer support has proven to be an effective engagement tool for students who are struggling in their families. Issues with truancy and behavior can lead to disruptions in class time and poor educational outcomes, and I'm experiencing that. Parents struggling with these issues are sometimes punished with calls to CPS rather than receiving support. These at-risk students are often pushed out through suspension, expulsion, or police intervention. We are a network of families and young people eager to play a role in solving these problems. How can the New York State education system utilize family and youth peer advocates to help students and their families achieve their academic goals? And I just want to also add, during COVID, teachers were my heroes. I mean, they really kept us going. Yet when the return back to school doesn't happen as planned, and here we are months in, how do we make sure that support is there? I personally witnessed family peers in partnership in schools and youth peers on the ground. They've been welcomed by teachers. And I think it's the way to help staff and support the workforce. So that's my question.
So I'm going to start by saying that you've described what you know is a community school. That is truly the definition of a community school. And, you've heard me already say that it's a place where I did a lot of work at 218 in Washington Heights. And what that school did was bring in the family. And, even in the area of dental, it wasn't just the dental for the one child or the 3 children, it was for the whole family. And it was the celebration of the mother, signing up for entrepreneurship, a potential activity of learning, taking college classes, because we had a college classes on campus. We had some of the siblings taking cooking classes at night as well. We had opportunities for sports. The father wanted to play basketball with some of the other. So creating, as Kathleen knows, our conversations across the commissioners with the cross-agency work that we're doing right now is creating the opportunities to create these comprehensive responses to the needs of communities and families. Families feel connected when they are very much a part, and first of all, when they're welcome, and that there are activities within the space of schools for them, whether it's contributing and giving back, volunteering, whether it's really having some of the individuals do, share their favorite book, and that becomes an evening where they engage in some kind of dialogue. Other activities, we used to do, I was on Broadway on 196, and we would have theater on Broadway because many of our families couldn't go to Broadway. But guess what? We would do theater, and some of them loved, they were frustrated actors and actresses, and they would put together their own plays. So at the end of the day, it's taking these opportunities in these places and spaces to create the kind of connection, the connectivity, as we often think about with computers. That same connectivity to the school setting, to the hub, to places that are welcoming and afford parents, students, the entire community opportunities to celebrate, to be a part of, to give back, but also to take advantage of some of the things that can be offered so that they feel a commitment, a connection, and that becomes their school as much as it is their children's school. So I think there's an incredible opportunity. I have absolutely, as Kathleen knows, even yesterday, we had our conversation yesterday, it has become an incredible opportunity to talk across agencies and to hit aha moments. Oh my God. Now, for example, yesterday our conversation was about residential programs and how do we create a continuum and make sure that we're looking at obviously the least restrictive, but we also know the sense of clarity for parents, that they know that there is a continuum, that these services are out there, and that we create messaging for people to know how to access services and how to also give back and volunteer and be part of the solution as well. So for us, it's been an exciting time during a pandemic to connect and not to be so isolated, and to realize that together we can do so much more than we can working in isolation. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. We bring hope, the youth peers and the FPAs, and it's real, it's timely, it's now. So I'm so happy to hear that. It's budget though also, and how do we get youth peers and family peers into every school?
I just would add, Jenny, to build on what the commissioner said. One is, I think you've highlighted something that ironically, COVID made even clearer, that this siloing of services doesn't serve kids. So to the commissioner's point, I mean, community school model, which we in the legislature are very supportive of for exactly the reasons you described, having community-based agencies, having this range of services, having student mentors and all of the things you described. We are trying to put more money in to expand this community school model out. It's predominantly so far in the city of New York. There are others. We need to expand it. It can't be limited. And I happen to think that we have to learn from this experience of COVID that we can't silo these little things about, you know, the kid's day ends at 3 and then what? Because that child that you're talking about will benefit by this service being provided in the school environment where it's part of the school. So I think it's a learning moment, and we in the legislature are trying to put more money in for community schools.
And I would just like to add that I would really like to think more and perhaps talk offline about the peer advocate model more. We're hearing a lot about, you know, with the increase in mental health needs of students, that some of that peer-to-peer support is really, really important. So I'd love to have a conversation with you about how we can work with schools to devise ways to make that work better. So thank you for asking the question.
And that will be a follow-up email that you'll be getting soon. Thank you so much for saying that.
5 minutes.
Paige, I apologize, but I do need to leave shortly. I've asked my family to put up with my work schedule here, so I apologize. I look forward to working with all of you. I'll put my email here. Please feel free to reach out to my office. And, you know, some things are legislative and budgetary and other things are not in our purview, but we try to work with everyone in the education space.
Well, and Shelly, if after there was a group that would understand that family comes first, it would be families together. So please enjoy your grandchildren.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Have a great time.
Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
You're welcome. Bye.
And
Paige,
Kathleen
can I-
and Commissioner, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. If I can, and I can forward this to you. A couple of, you know, as we've been going through this process, I don't know if you're aware, there was a study done, Columbia School of Public Health. It's called Schools Often Respond to Health Needs with Discipline. And it's phenomenal. It just came out, I think, in February. Actually, I think the first version was in November and then it was redone in February, but I'll send that over to you. And this study, to Kathleen's point, it really goes into the issue of root cause, and it goes into how we have misused discipline. And first of all, it goes into the unintended consequences of our practices and how we've addressed, you know, we have not addressed the root causes of some of the behavior. We have not really done a good job with alternative disciplinary policies. And our commitment to trauma or informed care has been uneven at best. And the other thing that you'll see in this, and then there's another study that talks about developing a framework for excellence for mental health, which I'll send to you. And that one talks about the preventing measures and how to think of assessment the same way that we think of assessment in the fiscal space, and the same way that we think of assessment in schools in terms of assessing students' academic growth. And it talks about identifying symptoms earlier and how to respond to them, and creating maps to really infuse not only, of course, they talk about restorative practices, but real peer mediation, which Kathleen talked about, and peer support and mentoring, and children hearing the voices of other students at different levels, and recovery and responses, and all the different things that really are more preventive, so that we don't have to deal with the whole prison to pipeline issue in some cases, or dropouts, or even individuals feeling that the disconnect with society and their self-worth, and the disconnect to contributions of feeling that their self-importance and all the healthy things that we want for all of our young people. So I'll send some of that stuff over, and I'm always so excited to have this conversation because it's really, to me, it's the partner of the academic world that many times is invisible. And for us in our department, I want this to be very visible, very interconnected, and very much a part of what success looks like.
Wait, I cannot express to you how thrilled we are to hear these words coming out of the Commissioner of the State Education Department. And thank you, Kathleen. I know that you've contributed to that knowledge base of the department. And Commissioner, you really are speaking our language. And I joke that like 20 years ago, 22 years ago, I remember hoping that the governor in his State of the State might say the word children or families. And just like, we would like hold our breaths hoping. And now we have the commissioner from the State Education Department and the chair of the Education Department in the Senate speaking the language that we've been speaking for, decades, if not more. And as parents and young people, we've known this all along, and it's so refreshing and wonderful to hear you talking our language and knowing that we have an ally and a partner in both of you at State Education Department. We're so grateful. And so, we have, this is going live on Facebook right now, but we will have this recording on our website. So you may be getting a lot of applause from all of our members over the next several weeks as they watch this video and hear what you just had to say. It's really wonderful, wonderful to hear you saying these things.
Thank you. And what I want them to watch for is our actions responding.
Yes. Oh, we
to
will. That's one thing families are good about is making sure to, hold people accountable, because we're the ones who are, we're the biggest stakeholders, right? We're the ones, we always say like nothing about us without us. Like, don't make policies without including our input, because we are the ultimate stakeholders, families and young people themselves. And you're really great at listening to us and then acting on those, on the conversations that we're having. So thank you again.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too, everyone. Take care.
Hi,
Bye.
thanks for including me.
Thank you.
Bye.